This is the best movies recap. I will show you a sci-fi, romance, drama film from 2016 called Passengers. The spaceship Avalon can be seen traveling through space. There is a world called Homestead too. The vessel is on autopilot and all of the quarters are empty. The 5,000 passengers and 258 crew members are not moving. Suddenly, the ship passes through an asteroid belt. The ship is on a collision course with a giant and power is diverted to the main shield. There is an asteroid. The ship is malfunctioning after the asteroid collides with it. The ship begins self-reparations, but one of the hibernation pods is on. Jim is a mechanical engineer. An automated system tells him that he's awake. The ship is only 4 months away from Homestead and has been in suspended animation for 120 years. 2. He will be able to enjoy the luxurious aspects of that time. There is a ship. Jim gets instructions about his activities and his ID band prior to the arrival on the planet to take part off. He leaves his cabin to meet the people on the ship. The class is meant for an entire learning group. As the hologram explains the situation on Earth, Jim looks a little anxious. It was overpriced and overpopulated. Jim keeps asking why, despite being told to hold his questions to the end of the lesson. He is the only one there. He went to search for other people, because the hologram couldn't answer him. The main concourse of the ship is where he gets to. There is no one at the desk. Jim is sent off to talk to a steward when he asks to talk to a real person. He asked to speak to the captain because no one else was there. Even though he doesn't have access to go inside, he can see when he gets to the bridge. The main crew is not awake. Jim finds out that the ship is actually 90 when he goes to the observatory. It was years away from Homestead too. He woke up and went back to the concourse to send a message. He doesn't know how to get back into the swing of things. The overpriced call to Earth would take a long time according to the communications system. 55 years is how long it will take to get an answer back. Jim is very sad. He sees another person at the ship's bar. He's talking to a bartender and it seems strange to him. Jim realized that he's in robot when he went to get him a drink. It's called Arthur. Jim wants to find out more about him, but he can't. He can be there ahead of time. Jim woke up in his cabin the next day and went to the cantina. Most of the things on the menu are only for gold-class passengers. He is trying to figure out how to fix his chamber. He was able to get it operating after getting all the tools. There is a pod. Nothing happens. He decided to use the tools he found to get into the hibernation chambers. That doesn't work either. There are small problems around the ship. Jim talks to Arthur most of the time at the bar. The android tells him to break into one of the gold class rooms. Try to have fun on the ship. The entertainment system is one of the things Jim tries. He becomes even more miserable to be alone. He stumbles into the hibernation pod when he gets drunk and wanders around. The airlock is designed for spacewalks. Jim gets into a suit, goes to the airlock, pushes a lever, and then releases the button. There is an airlock door. He's in awe of the view as he leaves the ship. He is the only conscious human in that moment. Jim floats in space after releasing the magnets on his boots. He goes back to the airlock without the suit on. He pulls the lever but changes his mind in the last moment. Back inside, I slip on a bottle. Jim is drawn to a woman in one of the pods. He searches for her files and listens to her interview. I was enamored with her. He was sitting next to her and listening to her interviews. He's reading some of her work and talking to Arthur about it. He wants to go to another planet for a better life. He woke up early and not getting there and finding his perfect woman only for her to be out of reach. Jim gets the idea to wake her up when he keeps thinking about her. He talks it over with the robot, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. He would be stranding her there with him if he woke her up. The ship. Jim can't let it go as time goes by. He doesn't change his mind until one day. He went to her pod and activated it. He hides and goes back when she wakes up the same way he did. To his room. He went to the main concourse to look for her. She is as confused as he was a year ago. Jim takes her to the observatory and tells her they're the only ones awake. He told her that he couldn't get to either the crew or the main commands of the ship. Aurora wants to get back into her room. Jim explains that there is no special equipment on the ship. Help them get back into sleep, telling her that they're stuck. He told her that she should rest since she just came out of sleep. She was alone on the ship for more than a year. Jim went back to the bar and regretted what he did. He doesn't want Arthur to tell Aurora that he woke her up. On the next day, Aurora wakes up. She went back to the concourse and asked the automated info desk what was going on. There are pods. They go to get breakfast. The info desk is malfunctioning as they leave. Aurora realized that Jim had been eating the same breakfast for a long time. He gets one of the gold class menus for a year. Unlike Jim, Aurora isn't ready to fix the pods. To give up. She searches through the infirmary. The doors are open at the crew's hibernation quarters. There are more malfunction throughout the ship. Aurora reminisces about her life on the Avalon. She writes, jogs around the ship and swims in the pool. Her situation. She goes to the cantina to talk to Jim. She wants to know why he came to the colony. Jim first answers with slogans from the company, but then explains that he hopes he could build a life on the new world. After they get to the observatory, Aurora finally shares her reason for being there. She has a round-trip ticket. She wanted to live there for a year and come back to Earth. The greatest story ever was written by the first journalist. Jim figures that Aurora gives up on finding a solution to their problem. A way to cheer her up. He took her to the cinema and to the basketball court. He took her to the bar to meet Arthur. She relaxes until she remembers their situation. Jim feels terrible about what he's done to her. He was tinkering with something when Aurora walked into the observatory. He made a miniature of the Chrysler building for her. They go on a date later in the evening. They share their stories at diner. She told him that her father died when she was a teenager. Jim takes Aurora to the airlock to get into the spacesuits. They are going for a spacewalk. Someone has to share that experience with Jim. Jim takes off the magnets on their boots and they float together. They retreat to his cabin and kiss after coming back inside. They begin to live like a couple. Aurora moved into his cabin and wrote about her life on the ship. They eat and sleep together. Jim found the hydroponics bay on the ship. He brings flowers. They go to the observatory to see a red giant when the ship passes by. They celebrate Aurora's birthday in one of the many restaurants. The bar was on the ship. Jim went to the washroom and made a ring for Aurora. The bar is talking to someone. Jim was not aware that he was still when he woke Aurora up. To keep that a secret. Jim came back and she confronted him in disbelief. She ran away and panicked. Jim returned to his cabin to find her things gone. She runs away when he speaks after he runs into her in the cantina. Aurora is desperate. She went to Jim's cabin one night and wanted to kill him. Jim apologized to her because she keeps avoiding him. His actions to her. Aurora doesn't care that he fell in love with her. She can't forgive him for taking her life. Jim is in his cabin when another malfunction happens. The main command shuts down as the ship faces a critical error. The elevator malfunctioned after he walked into it. Jim planted a tree in the main concourse as Aurora walked into it. The food dispensary is malfunctioning, so she goes to the cantina. Suddenly, both of them heard the voice of the deck chief over the comms. There is a tree. There is a man standing in front of a tree in the concourse. They tell the chief about the situation. He doesn't understand how something can fail. Mancuso took them to the bridge and discovered something was wrong with the ship. The systems have to be checked manually. A robot almost falls on their heads when they leave the bridge. The ship has malfunctioned more frequently. He shows them how to collect the data. Mancuso and Jim are at the same place. He knows what happened to Aurora's pod. Jim was found to be terrible by the deck chief. When Aurora joins him, he's at the bridge, checking the collected data. He tells her that he can't do anything about it. Jim has a broken robot. Mancuso coughs as he walks out after taking a rest. Out of blood. Aurora goes for a swim because she can't sleep. There's a loss of gravity throughout the ship and she starts to drown. She is moving from the pool. She barely makes it out alive after the gravity drive reset. They are going to find Mancuso. The three of them are walking back to the bridge with the ship. 2 years ago, something took out a major system. The entire ship is trying to fix the failure. To help pick up the slack, the entire vessel will be stranded if they don't fix it. Jim and Aurora took Mancuso to the infirmary after he fainted. There are no treatments that can prolong the time he has left. The three of them meet in the observatory. The ID bracelet tells them to fix the ship. The ship starts shaking when the lights change to red. They run toward engineering after Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help. There was a failure in the gravity drive. There is another one that afflicts Arthur as well. Jim stopped him. They start looking for the problem after arriving in engineering. As they open the hatch, Aurora gets sucked in. The hull has been damaged by the asteroid. Jim holds onto the hatch as the hatch closes on him. They quickly sealed the breach after he got sucked in. Jim realized that there was more than one breach after fixing the problem. There is a hull. The two of them were following the trajectory of the meteor when it hit the reactor. Control the computer. Jim believes he can find replacement parts for it. The process of ventilating the reactor still fails even after they find the part and change it. They do it manually, but it fails again. Jim wants to open the vent door from the outside of the ship. The reactor can be cooled down. He gave Aurora Mancuso's as he was getting ready to leave the airlock. He might not come back. She tells him to come back as he walks into the airlock. She can't live on the ship without him. The reactor's temperature has hit critical heights. Jim is getting closer to the vent when a bolt from the reactor propels her arm. The door is visible from the outside. He is trying to get around the vent door in the reactor room. To open it, he realized that he would have to manually open the door. He tells Aurora. He told her to vent the reactor even though she didn't like the plan. He tells her that they have to save him, even though she doesn't want him to die. She is in the reactor. Jim broke his tether when fumes from the reactor pushed him away. The pressure in his suit is dropping. He tells Aurora that she needs to get to another suit. Bring him in. He apologized to her again. She flies out to get him, but her tether is too short. She grabbed onto his tether and pulled him in. Jim was dragged into the infirmary and found out that he was already dead. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to resuscitate him. Jim is revived by the medical pod. Aurora forgives him. Aurora fixes Arthur and gives him a proper space burial. Jim takes her to the infirmary and tells her that he's found a way to use the medical pod as a sleep one. He wants her to ride out the rest of the journey in the pod. She decided to stay with him awake on the ship after declining. Jim proposed to her and they lived out their lives on the ship. 88 years later, the Avalon arrives. The crew woke up and found the ship in a state of disrepair. Aurora retells the story of her and Jim's life on the ship. The rest were sleeping. Thanks for watching.